China, as you know. By the way, he invited me to China, and I invited him here. We both accepted. So I'll be going there with the First Lady at a certain point, and he'll be coming here, hopefully, with the First Lady of China. We are also going to be restoring the names to Fort Pickett, Fort Hood, Fort Gordon, Fort Rucker, Fort Polk, Fort A.P. Hill, and Fort Robert E. Lee.
I wanted to let the city know that I have declared a local emergency and issued a curfew for downtown Los Angeles to stop the vandalism, to stop the looting.
This is the first curfew in downtown Los Angeles since the George Floyd protests.
California's governor filed an emergency motion today to block President Trump's deployment of troops. A federal judge out of San Francisco today has denied that request.
Come on, brother. You think Donald Trump gives a about you? Come on, man.
Chanting, marching, blocking roads during rush hour, and sometimes facing off with crowds of police. A massive anti-ICE protest descended on downtown Chicago tonight.
Demonstration is happening outside the Seattle Federal Building, where people are trying to stop ICE from leaving with immigrants who have been detained.
We will send them back, and we will take back our country.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard today's edition of Human Events Daily, here live, Washington, D.C. Today is June 11th, 2025, Anno Domini. Folks, let's be blunt. We are never going to get another opportunity than the one we have right now. There's never going to be a better opportunity than the chance we have right now on mass deportations. Call it the stars aligning, call it whatever you want. But when you look at these insane riots, which started in Los Angeles and have now spread coast to coast, it's the entire country. We got New York, you got Atlanta, and this weekend, if you think LA was big, wait until you see what they're calling the No Kings riots that are going to be. And Rachel Maddow's up there on MSNBC every night, chanting these things on. You've got the guys from Indivisible are going to come out. Every left-wing Soros-aligned org is pumping money into this thing. Philadelphia apparently is the flagship. And in Washington, D.C., where I'll be at the military parade, you got to imagine that there's going to be some protesters that start going after the military there as well. Look, this is all going to come to a head on Saturday. But as the country watches these scenes play out, foreign flag, the flags of invaders marching across our streets. The more Trump escalates on immigration, the more popular he becomes, because the backlash to the insanity in American cities is growing and becoming more and more galvanized. Now is the time to advance. Now is the time to institute mass deportations coast to coast. I put it up on X a bunch of times. I would love to see an ICE reserve force be set up, much like the National Guard. By the way, I would join for free. I would pay you. I'd pay my own way. I'd pay out of pocket to be able to do this. And I'll bet you there's tons of veterans, probably millions of veterans in this country that feel the exact same way. Support your local ICE raids. And you know something? The support for these raids is getting higher and higher and higher. This is the best chance we're ever going to have, ladies and gentlemen. And it coincides almost perfectly with the 10-year anniversary of MAGA, which takes place on Monday. So think of it. On Saturday, you've got the military parade. You've got the mass riots planned across the country from Indivisible. You've also got on Monday the 10-year anniversary of MAGA. It's all coming to a head, and President Trump is guiding us through this storm. Folks, the storm is here. We'll be right back.
understand what America First truly means.
Welcome to the second American Revolution.
All right, folks, we're back here. Jack Posobiec, live, Real America's Voice. Also want to bring in the Salem Radio Network. This is hour 3 with the Charlie Kirk audience. And I got a quick message, folks. Listen up, because if you're still drinking that corporate watered-down nonsense that passes for coffee, it's time for a serious wake-up call. Blackout Coffee isn't just coffee. It's a statement. It's a declaration that you're done with weak beans and weak values. We're talking high-octane American roasted fuel for those who grind harder, stand taller, and never back down. Look, I love this stuff. Keeps me going. No jet lag Poso. How do you get there? It's with Blackout Coffee. Blackout Coffee isn't playing game. They're cranking out more bags than ever before, shipping faster than ever, and keeping you locked in with coffee that actually fires you up. Whether you're chasing big goals, crushing the daily grind, or just refusing to drink coffee made by people who hate you, Blackout Coffee has your back. So stop settling. Go to blackoutcoffee.com/Poso and use promo code POSO for 20% off your first order. Drink like a patriot. Drink Patriot. That's blackoutcoffee.com/Poso. Stop waiting and wake up. All right, folks, we're excited to have here on Human Events Daily today someone who's also got an op-ed up on humanevents.com, which you can go read right now. I've read it. I think it's fantastic, and I think you should read it as well. It's Congressman Dan Crenshaw of Texas, who is on the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and chairing the subcommittee on the Cartel Task Force. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jack.
So walk me through what you've put together here. So you have this new bill and then this op-ed. By the way, thank you, of course, for having it up on humanevents.com. Walk me through how this is going to really position the United States and particularly our military and I guess a whole of government focus, it seems like, towards actually combating the cartels that have just been allowed to fester for so long on both sides of this border.
Yeah, look, first op-ed among many, right? But this is the parting shot. And the first thing I want people to understand about the fight that we're in is that, well, we've been in the fight for quite a while. It's only in recent years that I think Americans have woken up to it, and it's because of the massive amount of fentanyl deaths that come from the cartels. But make no mistake, the cartels are a narco-terrorist insurgency that has been destroying Mexico from within for decades. And it's gotten so strong that it's time to act. And so what I want people to take away from this is the following. One, you're dealing with an insurgency. A terrorist insurgency. They use terrorist tactics. They use terrorist tactics to instill fear in civilians and to government officials. But they're also cartels and criminal organizations in some classical sense as well, right? They diversify their money making in a whole bunch of ways. They tap oil pipelines and sell it illegally. They engage in a massive amount of extortion, which has increased a lot in recent years. And of course, they sell drugs. Luckily, we've cut off a major funding stream for them, which has been human trafficking for the last 4 years under Biden. They could, estimates are about $12 to $13 billion a year just from that, because they charge you what's called a peso. It's like a head tax when you cross that river. And so at least that money has dried up because, well, it took Trump about 5 seconds to secure the border. So that's the good news we have. But we have more good news than that. We actually have a willing partner. There was elections in Mexico last year, and since October, President Sheinbaum has been in power. Now, she is a successor of the last president, and has a lot of those kind of populist socialist tendencies. But on security and on who she's put in charge of going after the cartels, we're seeing a massive difference in their willingness to cooperate with U.S. forces and actually take on this fight. And what I want people to understand is that, again, this is a counterinsurgency strategy fight. And I hate to break it to you, but that means 20, 30 years. You can look at something like Plan Colombia. So Plan Colombia, I was in high school in Colombia when President Bush announced that in the year 2000. Back then, everyone we knew had been kidnapped for ransom of some sorts. If we left the city, we'd be kidnapped. Our family car was shot up once. There was a car bomb that went off in what was called El Nogal. It's a popular country club that people would go to, places I would go to, places called like the Bogota Beer Company. The FARC had thrown hand grenades inside. It was a war. There was a literal counterinsurgency. The last couple of decades, that's changed. I mean, there's still problems in Colombia, but it's vastly different and vastly safer than it was before. So if you commit to a strategy, it does work, but you have to have a willing partner and you got to be willing to commit the resources. We have a willing partner, finally, and we have President Trump, who has said this will be a priority. One of the first things he did was designate the cartels as terrorist organizations. That has gotten everybody focused, I think, in the right direction. And that direction needs to be a counterinsurgency strategy where we rid Mexico, our biggest trading partner, of this narco-terrorist threat.
Well, and this is something as well where, you saw people in the MAGA movement and people say, okay, we don't want these wars overseas. And people were saying there was this not as much appetite for that as there had been in the past. To say, well, this isn't overseas. This is our backyard. Okay, this is our next door neighbor. And it is obviously in direct. I certainly hope that there aren't any people out there who actually think, oh, this isn't something we should know. This is direct effect on U.S. national interests if we have these narco-terror organizations operating on the country that we share a border with. It's ridiculous. And so I think all of those arguments kind of fly out the window. And I've said for years, I've said for absolute years, and people can go back and look, I've said that this type of strategy is something I would wholeheartedly endorse and support because it's what we need to be able to help Mexico, right? It's sort of the cliche, but, we do need to make Mexico great again because it directly affects us in the United States. In addition to, as you say, the human trafficking, the fentanyl deaths, the killing, all of the stuff, all of this that's going on. This isn't good for anybody. And we see so much of this border violence, of course, spills over into the United States as well. And a lot of these organizations, you mentioned the Jalisco cartel, the New Generation cartel, and so many others. These guys are brutal. These are absolutely brutal, the same way insurgents have been when they're faced in other parts of the world.
Yeah, I mean, they operate as paramilitaries. The Jalisco cartel in particular is extremely militarized. The Sinaloa cartel is a bit more what you would think of as sort of like the Godfather type cartel, a little bit more traditional, but still violent as hell. And across the board, what people don't understand either is cartel culture. These people engage in effectively a death worship, like a worship of the occult. I mean, they're part of their strategy in bringing in new recruits is to shoot one of them, make the other one eat the flesh of that one. If they refuse to, shoot that one, make the next one eat the flesh of that one. That's how deranged they are. You think ISIS is deranged? They learned all their derangement from the cartels. This has been going on for a couple decades. And as you said, too, politically, this is a rather unifying strategy, right? Like, obviously, the Republican Party, we debate constantly about like how we should be using our foreign policy powers. But this is both bipartisan and unifying amongst the parties. Very few. Obviously, people have concerns. Well, how can you partner with a corrupt government in Mexico? And my answer to that is, well, you're never going to get the perfect situation. So what's your answer? Do nothing? That can't be your answer. We've partnered with much worse, right? Like just try dealing with Iraqis and Afghanis. Trust me, this is, and also if you want to reduce the corruption, you actually have to be there on the ground. American influence does have an effect. The counterinsurgency doctrine gets a bad name because people think we failed at doing it. It's not really true. It worked pretty well. What we failed at was realizing that it's a 20-year strategy. It takes a long time. And only in places like Colombia have we actually bothered to continue to commit the resources. And guess what? It actually works. So, and when it's your biggest trading partner and your neighbor and your backyard, and like we are so fused together, as you mentioned, just as two countries, it's just not a threat that you can ignore. We cannot have a failed state on our border. It just cannot happen. And exactly, make Mexico great again. Like I tell Mexicans this all the time because they're like, oh, you want to invade us? No, we don't. We want you to be prosperous and safe, and we want you to thrive. And guess what? You might need some of our AC-130 gunships in order to do that. So how about we make this happen?
Why not? Why not work with it together? We're on with Congressman Dan Crenshaw. He's walking through this new strategy, working with the Mexican government. He's got the new bill out. The post is up. The op-ed is up at humanevents.com. Jack Posobiec. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back here. Human Events Daily on Real America's Voice and the Salem Radio Network.
I'm Bo Davidson with your Real America's Voice News headlines. But the Los Angeles anti-ICE protests have taken a new worrying turn as curfews have been declared in LA, and now this unsettling video that shows tactical gear being dished out to these violent protesters. The unidentified person is shown handing out riot shields and gas masks to protesters in Los Angeles, just steps away from federal buildings. This comes in the backdrop of California Governor Gavin Newsom insisting that the LA protests have been, quote, largely peaceful. And Terry Moran is out at ABC News, just a day after the network suspended the correspondent over calling Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller a world-class hater. ABC ended Moran's contract saying, and based on his recent post, which was a clear violation of ABC News policies, we have made the decision not to renew. Moran had interviewed President Trump just a few weeks ago, saying after it in a post on X, quote, the president was also a hater, but that his hatred was in service of his own glorification, unquote. Meanwhile, Elon Musk says he regrets his political feud with President Trump. He wrote on X early this morning saying, quote, I regret some of my posts about President Trump last week. They went too far. Musk deleted his previous post alleging that Trump was mentioned in the Jeffrey Epstein files. And the fracas all started when Musk spoke out against Trump's big, beautiful bill, calling it an abomination, and claimed credit for Trump's election victory. Trump said over the weekend he has no desire to repair their relationship, but wishes Musk well. And in other news tonight, the Kennedy Center will feature the Broadway show Les Miserables, where more than 10 cast members have stated that they will boycott and not perform. President Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, and Second Lady Usha Vance will all be in attendance tonight. Trump was appointed as Kennedy Center chairman shortly after entering his second presidential term. Trump, of course, appointed Rick Grinnell as the center's director to usher in a new golden age of the arts. And those are your Real America's Voice headlines. I'm Bo Davidson. We take you back now to Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
Today, they talk about influencers. These are influencers, and they're friends of mine. Jack Posobiec. Where's Jack? Jack, who's done a great job.
All right, folks, we're back here. Jack Posobiec, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice, also live coast to coast with Hour 3 of the Charlie Kirk Audience on the Salem Radio Network. We're on with Congressman Crenshaw. Congressman, while we have you on here for a few more moments, I got to get your response. The LA riots, this discussion about perhaps use of the Riot Act, obviously the Insurrection Act, all of these various potential uses of the military. Where do you come down on this?
Look, President Trump is doing exactly what he has to do, which is restore law and order. This is a key marker of his campaign theme, and I think anyone watching, including Democrat strategists, are like, this is playing exactly into why Donald Trump got elected, because he said he would take care of this kind of thing, and that's exactly what he's doing. Governor Newsom is putting out these nonsensical statements that, hey, we got it under control, this is inflammatory to some National Guard, and there's been like 30, 40 LAPD officers injured, over $3 million in damage. You don't have it under control. And it's not fair to the LAPD to just say, you know what, you guys just are going to have to deal with that. So, of course, we should be sending in the National Guard and making a statement about we will not stand for this. One thing we notice as we look at this, though, is, okay, so you get arrested for burning a police car. And let's say you're not a U.S. citizen, but you're here legally. Let's say you're a permanent resident. Well, or a DACA recipient. Well, there's a number of things in law that allow for your legal status to be revoked. But among those is not necessarily engaging in a riot, harming a police officer, burning a cop car during a state of national emergency. So I just introduced the Riot Act with a bunch of co-sponsors, which fixes that loophole. We should be able to, look, because everybody's imagining that person running around burning things and carrying the Mexican flag. I don't know if that person's illegal or legal or what they are, but if they are here on some kind of legal status but not a U.S. citizen, that should be factored in. The fact that they're rioting and doing what they're doing should be factored into whether or not they get to keep their status here legally.
Wait, Congressman. I just want to make sure that we're hearing you clearly here. You're saying that as it is currently written in law, these types of activities could not cause someone or not meet the threshold for losing their ability to stay legally in the United States? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I mean, they go to jail. Like, they go to jail just like anybody else. They'd serve time. But as far as deportation, as far as losing your legal status, that wouldn't be part of the equation, because it's not one of the list of things which would revoke your status, for instance. And so we're simply adding this into it, given the times we're in.
Well, and that's a great point there, because so much of our immigration legal system is just antiquated. It's not actually written to be met with the situation at hand today. It's written for, the Ellis Island era, or, various other eras of immigration that we've had in the past. And none of the Irish immigration, et cetera, none of this was ever written for this mass open borders, or a mass situation where we have this, just these invaders that have come across some 10 million plus in just 4 years. And we're dealing with this legislative framework that is totally inadequate to meet the moment.
Yeah, no, the tools just aren't there, and so look, this is a bill that fixes just one of those many loopholes, and it doesn't. For any detractors, not that they're not on this show, but critics would say, oh, well, you're trying to stifle free speech. People who protest would not have their status revoked. No, it's very specific. You're a criminal. You've already committed a criminal act that you would go to jail for anyway. We're just saying that if you're going to go to jail for that criminal act, then it should also have an impact on your immigration status. I don't think that's a crazy thing to do.
Right. If you're here on a student visa or a work visa or LPR, green card, whatever it is, okay, you are not given that as a means to be able to participate in riots against law enforcement or military or anyone else that you might be encountering out there. That's not what you're allowed to do. That is a privilege, and it should be revoked immediately. So I find it so unbelievable that actually was a loophole. And I commend you, by the way, not just for the cartel bill that you put forward, but also for this. Congressman, I know you've got to run. We are just about out of time. Where can people go to keep up with what you're doing, and on the cartel subcommittee, as well as everything you're putting out?
You put a lot of stuff. My Instagram, @DanCrenshawTX. That's the best place to follow. That's probably where we post the most substantive content and content on what the Mexicans are doing against the cartels, too. Again, there's a lot of good news and things to look forward to here. The Mexicans are going out basically every day, going after cartels with our help. There's a lot more we can do. We post a lot of those stories that you won't find anywhere else there as well, and we'll keep you updated on our progress. There's a lot to do on this subject, but I'm excited about the fact that we finally have all the right pieces in place to maybe make some progress and actually fight this insurgency.
Let's get it done, folks. Congressman Dan Crenshaw here, Human Events Daily. Right back.
I'm Bo Davidson with your Real America's Voice News headlines. Well, tonight the Republicans and Democrats will square off not on the House and Senate floor, but on the baseball field in Alexandria, Virginia, as the annual congressional baseball game will take place tonight. In 2017, as you may remember, James Hodgkinson opened fire on the players, injuring 4, including Republican whip Steve Scalise. Scalise will be on site for tonight's game, which the Republicans have won for several consecutive years. And in other news, California labor leader David Huerta, president of the SEIU, was released yesterday on a $50,000 bond after being arrested for conspiracy to impede an officer for his activity in the anti-ICE protest in LA on Friday. Huerta stated, quote, "This fight is ours, it's our communities, but it belongs to everyone," Huerta said in Spanish. He also added, "We all have to fight for them." Meanwhile, the LA anti-ICE protests have taken a new turn that's worrying as curfews have been declared from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. in LA. And now this unsettling video that you see here shows tactical gear being dished out to these violent protesters. The unidentified person is shown handing out what appear to be riot shields and gas masks to protesters in Los Angeles, just steps away from federal buildings. This comes in the backdrop of California Governor Gavin Newsom insisting that the LA protests have been, by his measure, largely peaceful. And in other news, Terry Moran is out at ABC News. Just a day after the network suspended the correspondent over calling Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller a, quote, world-class hater. ABC ended Moran's contract saying, quote, "And based on his recent post, which was a clear violation of ABC News policies, we have made the decision not to renew," end quote. Moran had interviewed President Trump just a few weeks ago, saying after it in a post on X, the president was also a hater, but that his hatred was in service of his own glorification, end quote. Elon Musk says he regrets his political feud with President Trump. He wrote on X early this morning saying, quote, "I regret some of my posts about President Trump last week. They just went too far." And those are your Real America's Voice News headlines. I'm Bo Davidson. We take you back now to Human Events.
And Jack, where's Jack? Where's Jack? Where is he? Jack, I want to see you. Great job, Jack. Thank you. What a job you do. You know, we have an incredible thing. We're always talking about the fake news and the bad, but we have guys, and these are the guys who should be getting Pulitzers.
All right, Jack Posobiec here, back live, Human Events Daily, Washington, D.C. We want to bring in Real America's Voice and the Salem Radio Network, Hour 3, Charlie Kirk. Folks, while the media is obsessing about Trump's latest press conference, something big is brewing, and nobody's talking about it except right here. Starting July 1st, 2025, under the Basel III International Banking Regulations, gold will officially be reclassified as a Tier 1 asset. What does that mean? That puts it on the same level as cash and U.S. Treasury. Here's what it means for you. Gold is money again. In the first quarter alone, thousands of tons of gold were moved back to the U.S. from Europe, and central banks worldwide are quietly stacking gold at record levels. That is not a coincidence. So, if the most powerful institutions on the planet are hoarding gold, why aren't you? Don't wait. Call Allegiance Gold. They'll help you secure real physical gold and silver delivered directly to your home or safely positioned inside your IRA or 401k. Now, look, I've been partnered with them for years because I trust them. The Human Events Daily audience can trust them as well. So go to protectwithposo.com or call 844-577-POSO. That's 844-577-7676. And you could be eligible to receive up to $5,000 in free precious metals. So you have everything to gain, and if you don't act soon, a lot to lose. Gold is freedom. Gold is sovereignty. And now gold is money. That's protectwithposo.com or call 844-577-7676 today. Protectwithposo.com. Folks, I just want to say this again on the mass deportations. We're never going to get a better opportunity than this. We're not. And if you go look at the swing right now, and the Post-Millennial has a story up, there are analysts, even on CNN, they're crashing out because they're seeing a 40-point shift even among actual immigrants, to Republicans on the issue of border security and ICE enforcement. Happen to know an immigrant very well. Her name is Tanya Tay. Talk to her every single day about this. And she, Tanya Tay Posobiec, will tell you absolutely, as someone who came here the right way, that anyone who comes to this country with the hope of changing it, of altering it, and demanding things from this country, especially when you broke in, they need to go. They all need to go. So again, these 40-point shifts, these massive shifts in the polls and public opinion, it's never going to happen again. The mass deportations have to happen right now. We have to escalate. We have to advance. I'm talking ICE reserve units. I'm talking whatever you need, whatever budget they need, it all needs to go out. Now, on the same, or at the same time, I should say, simultaneous to all this, we're seeing the rise of AI. And we are seeing this having an effect, a massive effect across certainly the information space. And that's what we do here on a daily basis. Because on human events, we're focused on your daily events of humanity. And in fact, I wrote an entire book about unhumanity last year. And so this is kind of indelibly linked to everything that we do. I don't know if anybody ever caught the tie-in between unhumans and human events, but we'll see. A little bit of co-branding that we do there. But folks, I wanted to bring in so to discuss the latest news on AI. It's Larry Ward. He's the president of Market Rhythm and a human events columnist. He's going to have a piece that's it's either up now or it's going up very soon. Larry, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, Larry, there's this huge news that just dropped. So you and I, it is up, by the way. The piece is up. AI is not a technology, is a synthetic entity. I love what you have here, this discussion about the melding between humanity, transhumanism, in a sense. But also the huge news that just dropped is that one of the biggest AI companies out there, Midjourney, is being sued by Disney, and I expect more are going to get in on this lawsuit over copyright infringement. And I'm sitting here thinking, wait a minute, that's exactly what you and I were talking about the very last time I had you on the show a couple of days ago.
Absolutely. Look, I can't believe I'm going to do this, but I'm actually going to defend Disney's actions on national television. The Disney attorney said piracy is piracy, and it's right. AI companies have basically plundered copyrighted material from publications, conservative and liberal publications, from movies, from news programs. They have basically plundered all of our intellectual property, and we're going to have these discussions and say, not just in the courts, because we can fight it out in the courts, but there's a lot more than that. It's a shift in terms of what it means, to have intellectual property, to be able to own what you created, and the way the AI companies are going, they obviously don't want you to own anything. Remember what Klaus Schwab said: "You'll own nothing and like it."
Well, and that's what it comes down to. So, and for folks who didn't catch the previous piece that you put up, what you were talking about was this idea that what these AI companies are doing is that they were going out and sucking up a lot of copyrighted content and essentially using it to program these large language models. So program Grok, to train Grok, to train Midjourney, to train ChatGPT, and they're plugging in books, news articles, movies, podcasts, whatever, but not actually going and getting a license from any of the owners of this. And that is, and so Disney is coming in, and let's just be frank, we know that Disney has always been very, and anyone in the business knows that Disney is the strongest one when it comes to defending the IP. God forbid you mess around with Mickey Mouse or those others out there. Even though I believe the first iteration Steamboat Mickey is now free domain. It's in public domain because it hit the 100-year threshold. But Disney is extremely litigious. You drop something about the Avengers or one of their Marvel properties, Spider-Man now, I guess they have, whatever else, they're coming after you. They're absolutely coming after you. And so they've got the pockets to actually fight some of these big companies. Is that the idea here?
Absolutely. And look, they had the right to. It's their property. They paid a lot of money for Marvel. They've invested years into their intellectual property, whether you like Disney as a company, which I particularly don't. But at the same time, Disney has a right to its intellectual property. And what's happened is these AI companies, basically said, hey, we're going to steal everything we can to train our models, and we'll get back to the intellectual property later. But they haven't really moved fast enough for these to create these kind of license deals. And Disney is within its rights, and it's within its power to sue. And now what we talked about last time was, they're paying these liberal publications like massive deals to the New York Times, to the Washington Post, to Axios and Politico, and they're not, they need to make the same market deals with conservative publications like Post-Millennial, Human Events, and the Washington Examiner, and Uncovered DC, all of these publications that they are also taking intellectual property from. They need to pay for their content, not only for licensing purposes, but also to balance the scale, because, we all know that AI has a massive liberal bias problem.
And that's what it comes down to. So tell me a little bit more about your new piece regarding AI. I'm being told, by the way, that Russ Vought is going to be holding a gaggle in a few minutes, so we're going to see if we can pull that up. But before that time, can you tell us a little bit more about your new piece about the way we should be thinking about AI as an entity more than a technology?
Right. A technology. Look, AI is not a technology. We have designed AI in a way that it is really a synthetic entity. And what I mean by that is a technology is a tool that is wielded by humans, like a hammer, like a computer, right? Like you put an input, you click a button, you get an output. AI is different. AI is perfectly capable of being autonomous, to write code on its own, to create reports on it. You're able to use AI in many, many autonomous fashions. And when it's becoming autonomous and more autonomous, it's turning into a synthetic entity. And entities are like corporations, they're like governments, they're like humans, right? An entity requires governance. An entity requires morality. Entities without morality crash and burn. Entities without the principles that are installed in the foundation of our nation, the biblical principles that are founded, is what made the United States the best country in the world. And we need to instill biblical principles into the AI framework, into the core of the AI programming, and to make sure that it always protects human dignity. But we do have to treat it as an entity, and we're running out of time, because the longer it takes for us to make these decisions, like thou shalt not steal is a great example with what's going on with content in Disney. If the longer it takes us to do it, the more powerful AI is going to become, and the harder it's going to be to constrain.
Oh, and that's what it all comes down to. And so by the way, I'm being told that the Russ Vought gaggle is imminent, but also that it hasn't begun yet. So we can chat for a little longer, Larry. The idea being, though, that AI is going to be here to stay, and it's here. It's not going away. Just like any new technology, Internet 1.0, 2.0, of course, with the social media, and AI is really, in a sense, Internet 3.0 or Web 3.0. And these new technologies never leave. The question is, are we going to utilize them properly as tools, or are these tools going to become more powerful than us directly and have this power over us? And we've already seen this, by the way, doctors going to ChatGPT and Grok to look up things and finding absolute failures. Or I saw one the other day of someone talking about a car. They were doing a DIY problem, and they were trying to work on their car, and it just gave them these options that were completely beyond anything that were useful. And the guy's car was like completely messed up, transmission blown, all the rest of it. And so while these issues do exist, we have to understand this is the worst AI is ever going to be. It's only going to get better and more powerful from here. So we're coming up on a quick break. We've got Larry Ward on. He is the president of Market Rhythm, and he's got 2 new columns up on humanevents.com that you guys really need to read. one about all about the copyright issues regarding AI and some of the big money that's going to bat. And Larry called it, just absolutely called it, Disney now suing some of the biggest AI companies out there regarding copyright over Disney IP. We're talking Walt Disney World, we're talking Marvel, we're talking Star Wars, all that stuff. They are going to fight to protect their IP. So we're going to see how that translates down the line. Stay tuned. Quick break. Right back. Jack Posobiec.
When I'm working long hours, I'm always listening to Human Events with Jack Posobiec.
All right, Jack Posobiec, we're back here, Human Events Daily, Real America's Voice, and the Salem Radio Network with Hour 3 on the Charlie Kirk Show. We're on with Larry Ward, and we are talking all about these issues with AI. Also being told that Russ Vought, the OMB director, may be coming out soon for a gaggle over at the White House. If that happens, we will cut to that momentarily. But in the meantime, Larry, you've got these two huge pieces up all about AI, and you called it, man, last week when you were on the show, that we now see Disney, the behemoth that is Disney, is fighting AI, and they're looking at this and saying, look, you're stealing our content. Well, another one that you and I were just chatting in the break, and you brought up that Google might also be facing a lawsuit as well, or potentially steering into some choppy water with something that they're doing. Isn't that right?
Well, absolutely. If you go to Google search right now and you're typing in something, you're pulling up Google's summary of the content that you're looking for. And where are they getting that content from? They're getting it from the content creators who have intellectual property rights to it. And what it's doing is it's creating a zero-click economy for these publishers, which means that everything is going to be answered for you in these chat windows, and you won't need to go to the source. And obviously, we know that publishers and content creators earn money on their content based on advertising or selling subscriptions or selling selling books and videos and such like that. So what they're doing is they're taking all of that content, they're using it for their own benefit. Now, of course, there's ads on Google, so Google's making money on that content, but the actual content creators are getting pulled out of it, and we have to think this through. We can't survive if the content creators, are going to be starved. We need good content. We need to pay for it.
Well, and so what Google is doing now is, rather than link to, and everyone knows, Google started as a search engine. The idea, and going back, that was, really kind of, I guess I would say, a bridge between Web 1.0, Web 2.0 was the search engine, because of course, websites were, going back into like deep internet lore, right? People had websites, but you didn't know what website was out there because there was no way to know what you didn't know. And so the idea of the search engine came up. Well, okay, I can search the website, and there were a ton of these. There was Metacrawler, there was Yahoo, and then eventually Google came up and just beat them all. And they still would go to link to a site. So you would go to that site, and then you could click and you would get their content. You might get a little, 2-sentence blurb in the middle. But now what they're doing is they're going to the site, summarizing it for you, and then tracking back. So of course, what does that do? Well, that keeps you on Google longer. So you're being fed that Google's content more and more. And that's that's of course what Google wants, right?
Oh, absolutely, because they don't have to share their revenue. They keep all the revenue on. And look, Google has its own antitrust issues, and this isn't going to help that. Not even a little bit. So, what has to happen is they've got to inject those links in. Perplexity is actually doing a better job with this, because they'll summarize the stuff, but they'll tell you exactly where they got their content and give you the links so you can go to those pages on their own. But all of these AI platforms must license the content from the content creator before it can use it, and they should. It's the right thing to do.
That's exactly right, Larry. Where can people go to access your new op-ed and get more info?
humanevents.com. It's a really important op-ed. It kind of sets the framework to what AI is really and what it is not. It's not just a technology. It's a synthetic entity. And we actually have to look at it because entities are dangerous when they're uncontrolled.
No, I think that's exactly right. Thank you so much, Larry, for being on. Folks, what we're seeing here, okay, this is the confluence of so many different threats right now. You've got the rise of AI, which needs to be codified and needs to be met head on, absolutely head on. And I use AI, I use it as a tool. Okay, I use it a ton. But at the same time, we have to be careful with where it's going. That's number one. Number two, the protests, LA, the mass migration. What do you think is going to happen in this country when all of the jobs get taken by AI and we've got these millions and millions of low-skill laborers here who don't have work. You think the protests this week are bad? You think the protests on Saturday are going to be bad? Why do you think they're burning Waymos? Because the Waymo self-driving taxi is a direct competitor to the illegals. And don't even try to tell me that the illegals aren't driving Uber, because we all know they are. Get it together. This is a fight that's brewing, and it comes to a head Saturday. Ladies and gentlemen, as always, you have my permission to lay ashore.